What's up guys, Garrett here. Welcome back to another video. In this one we're going to be continuing with our debugging series, and we're going to be going over some application layers, specifically the debug flags and then the application layers section within those debug flags. Anyway, so the ones that we're going to be going over here are the widget tree, the render tree, and the layout tree, or the layer tree, sorry. And if you see me look over here, that's because my notes are over there, and this is just kind of a lot going on here, so I'm going to be looking over there from time to time. Anyway, before we start the video though, I want to ask that you guys go down a little bit lower on the page and give me a like for this video. Helps out the channel a lot, and also it helps me to know if you guys like the videos or not. I guess by that logic you could also give a dislike, but preferably you give a like. The other thing is, in the description below I have a link to a survey, Google Forms survey. Please, I would ask that you guys go and fill out that survey. It really helps me to get some feedback on my videos, on the channel as a whole, and lets me know, how I can do better or other things that I can do that you guys might be interested in seeing. So check that out, link in the description below. Really helps me out. I appreciate it. All right, let's get on with the video. Just a reminder, the setup that we have here is basically just the standard Flutter app that you get whenever you create a new project, and that's basically this. And if you click on the plus button, it goes up, and that's pretty much it, right? And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using that to demonstrate how to do some of these debugging things in Flutter. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to be talking about the widget tree. And this is basically a dump of just every single widget that Flutter is using to build your application. And so what we can do is we can uncomment this out right here and just type in, this is a method that you have to use. So type in debug dump app, and you might also have to import this package, the Flutter rendering package, possibly. And if we save this, we'll go and refresh that, right? I will drag this up here, and I will hit the plus button, and we get this kind of like cluster, like, that's not the right word. We kind of get this this like kitchen sink almost of just everything that's happening right now. And it might appear at first to make no sense, right? So if we go here, make a new note, I will paste this, which is pasting what I just did, right? And this is essentially, don't worry about having to read this or anything like that. It's not too important. And as a matter of fact, if you go and do this along with the video, because there's not really any coding, you'll probably get way more out of it than you would if you were trying to squint and look at my screen anyway. So just maybe do that. I think it might be more helpful to do it that way. So this is every single widget that we have in the application right now, right? And the bigger your application is, of course, the longer and more complex this might look. And you might also notice by looking at this stuff that a lot of it, in fact, the vast majority of it isn't things that you've written. They're not part of your code. And that's normal. That's okay. That's good. That's the way it is. What happens is that since everything is a widget, even widgets are made up of widgets, and when the Flutter team builds these widgets that we use, such as the text widget, or the floating button widget, or the center widget to center these things horizontally and vertically, or the app bar widget, right? They're all made up of other widgets. And so this is dumping everything, including the widgets that we don't even know about, but that Flutter is using. And so that's why things here kind of look a little more complex, if you will, more questionable even than we would have maybe expected. The next thing I want to show you guys, and this is very useful. Let's say you made your own widget, right? And you might notice here, or if you do this yourself, that I'll just take this for example, a random one like theme. This is a widget called theme. Okay, cool. So this here has the widget, and then it has some parentheses, and it has a lot of information inside of these parentheses, right? There's a lot of properties inside of these parentheses. Well, what does that mean? What is that? That's basically all of the information about that widget, right? And if you make your own widgets, you might want to have your own information be displayed inside of that debugging thing there, right? In case you ever have to do that. And you can do that on each widget that you create by overriding the debug fill properties method, right? And so inside of there, we call debug fill properties on super, right? And then what we do is properties add, and there's a number of different properties. There's a string property, there's a double property, I believe there's a percentage property, there's some other ones, and I would suggest going and checking those out. But basically what we're able to do is we're able to add each one of these things, so like button theme. So in this case, I'm going to show you guys what we're going to do here. So I have this, we're going to say our property is going to be called message, and it's going to be called hey Garrett, here I am. We're going to set this to true. And what show name is basically going to do is make it so it shows us this message thing here. And I would say we can property name maybe. Property name. Okay, let's do that. Let's drag this back up. Refresh this. Hit that again. We'll let this go through. It doesn't print it all at once, and there's a lot going on there. So might not expect it to be able to do that all at once, right? Let's go back here and watch what happens. I'm going to search my name. And there it is. It actually showed up, right? So right here, and I will zoom in for this. Hope that's big enough. Right here, what we have is my homepage. That's our widget, the one that we created, right? Well, we didn't technically create it. Flutter created it for us because we're using the standard, Flutter thing. But that's this right here, my homepage, right? And then inside of there, we have some dependencies, okay? And then it tells us what the state is, which is my homepage state. That makes sense because we're inside of that. And then we have the property name. That looks familiar too, because remember, that's what we called our property. And then we have, hey Garrett, here I am. And you can see that this would allow us to give some data about what's going on inside of our widget if we needed to go and debug this. And it doesn't have to be text like this. I mean, it has to be text because this is a string property. If you want to put a percentage, if you want to put a double, if you want to put any other kind of data, you can do that with, you would change this part here. But it doesn't have to be hard-coded. This could be a variable coming from something else, just depending on what we want to know about what's going on. And so in that way, you can see that this becomes a very powerful thing when we're trying to debug our applications, where we can basically just give whatever information we think is relevant to the console, and it'll show it to us inside of the entire scope of the project. One more thing I want to mention about this, about the widget tree, calling that debug dump app, and then we'll move on to the next one, the render tree, is that it is important to note that this cannot be called inside of the build method, and it has to be called after this has run once and after the build method has been run once. And so by calling it inside of our increment counter, which is the event handler for this button, we ensure that we meet all of those requirements. And in fact, it is recommended to call it inside of an event handler. So keep that in mind if you go to use this. Okay, let's remove that real quick. We'll note that nothing else comes up. That's good. Next thing I wanted to show you is the render tree. So we will uncomment out this, the debug dump render tree, and also note for this you have to have the render package imported. I will hit this button again and we will see that we get more output, albeit very different looking output. Now that this has finished outputting, let's go and copy this, or paste this rather. We'll go all the way up to the top. And we'll see, we'll look at this. Wonder what this is, right? I want to note here that this render tree that we're looking at right now, this is what we would want to use if we're debugging a layout issue, right? And the reason that we would want to use this is because we can see two things on every single child here that are very important. And these are the size. Hopefully that's kind of big enough. But we can see the size here and the constraints. So we can see the size of this particular box, whatever that is, I don't know. And we can see the constraints that are being placed upon it. Now the size isn't necessarily the same as the constraints, but the constraints, if we're wondering why something is so small, it would make sense to check out the constraints. Now this particular thing here can be called whenever we want, as long as it's not during a layout or a paint phase, okay? And so by calling it, which is actually the rule of thumb here again, by calling it inside of an event handler, we ensure that we're not calling it during the layout or the paint phase, and that's exactly what we want to happen. One thing I'd like to note here though is, let's find a good one maybe. The creator field here tells us what created each widget. And that's something that can be very powerful, as we are then able to actually, see what's going on. So in this case, if I'm looking at this correctly, we can see here, I think it goes this way. So I think the column here was created by the center widget, which if we look at our code, which would be true right here, which was created by the body builder, which I think would be in here. I think that's a Flutter thing. I don't know exactly what that is, which was created by a media query, which I'm assuming would have to do with the overall application when it's created and how it is able to respond to the given device that it's on. So something very interesting to note if you're looking to see why things are laid out the way they are, definitely check out the render tree. You'll be able to see the size of all your widgets. You'll be able to see the constraints on those widgets, and you'll also be able to see what created each widget, which is definitely something that can be very helpful as you're going throughout this process. Next thing I want to show you guys is going to be a little bit quicker than the other ones, is the layer tree, and specifically the debug dump layer tree, right? That's the method that we're going to be able to call to see the layer tree of what's going on here. And what is the layer tree? The layer tree, when Flutter builds your application, when it builds on the phone or on the device and we can see it, what happens is that it basically creates all these layers for everything that's going on. And these layers allow it to basically manage things independently of one another, so that when it goes to rebuild your application or see what's changed throughout your application, it doesn't have to rebuild everything because it can just talk to an individual layer, right? And that helps it to be more performant. So let's go ahead and redo the state on that one. We'll click this plus button and we'll see that we get what appears to be a similar looking to the previous one, but what did I just do? But in reality, a very different output. So let's go over here. We'll copy that, or we'll paste. I can't talk. We will get rid of that. We'll come back in here, and let's take a look at what we've got here. We've got a bunch of layers. I believe each one of these is an independent layer, right? Which would make it a lot easier for Flutter, again, to be able to update things, to repaint things without having to completely wipe away the entire application and put it back in the screen, right? So it makes it more efficient. The next thing that we have here, we have what is the device pixel ratio. And so what happens is that when Flutter first goes over this, the root level, the first layer, it basically determines what the ratio of device pixels to logical pixels will be. What's happening right here is it's basically saying we have a 2-to-1 ratio, right? So we have 2 up here and 1 device or 1 logical pixel down here. And so that gives us this 2-to-1 ratio, right? And depending on the device, you might have a different ratio. And then of course, as we go down, these are all the layers again, like I said. So this definitely helps Flutter a lot in terms of performance, in terms of reducing the amount of time it takes to do things. And this is how we can see all of the different layers that our application or that Flutter has created in creating our application. So I hope this video was helpful for you guys. If anything is confusing, I know this stuff gets a little weird. So if anything is confusing, if you have any further questions, let me know down in the comments below. Don't forget to check out the survey for my channel. Let me know what you guys think of the videos. I would love to have your feedback so I can, get better and provide more value and help you guys out more than I am. Yeah. Oh, if you like the video, subscribe. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe. And I will see you guys all next week. Take care. Peace.